you've got to work 24/7 every year of your life and never give up, really, because at times the going gets so bad and so horrible and unbelievably difficult. And that's why people my age, because I'm a senior person in British photography now, never reach my age in photography. They go off and make furniture or babies or whatever they do, you know, become estate agents, because you've got to stick at it. And it's just unbelievably difficult as a career. But the rewards are immense. I wouldn't be sitting here with you now unless I'd stuck with it. I've stuck with it 40 odd years, you know. It's just impossible to be a photographer that long, virtually, now. Basically, way back in the 80s, I did a major project in the City of London on Broadgate. I did all the photography to promote Broadgate and did all this photography of the workers and the building this massive site near Liverpool Street Station. And it became a famous piece of work, really, primarily because most people weren't interested in photographing workers and businessmen at the time. And it became extremely well known. It formed a body of work in a book called Work. Work was, in 1991, voted the best photographic book in the world, which was extraordinary, at the Barcelona Primavera. And on top of that, Work was actually at the National Portrait Gallery for a few months, in fact. And so when it came to the Road to 2012 project, and there were loads more of suited people or working people or managers or construction managers and workers, and I was the obvious man to do it. Well, it's a very difficult thing, photographing people, especially people that have not been photographed before very much, or people that have been photographed before that have taken a normal press stance, a few clicks, a few flashes going off, and the photographer runs away after 10 minutes, you know. Someone who's going to a photographer's going to hang around and really, really go at it for 2 or 3 hours at you, you know, and really trying to develop something up. He's new to these people, and I have to control them to a certain extent. And in order to control them and in order to control the situation, you've got to be really experienced. You can't be a young gun with these people. They'll just eat you alive and you'll end up with nothing. So all my vast experience of 30, 40 years is coming into play in order to handle and develop something from these situations I'm confronted with. Be extremely, extremely observant, watching all their mannerisms, the way they interconnect between each other, because I'm doing groups, as you know, essentially. I've done 2 individuals, I think, but they're essentially groups. Watching how they relate together, how they feel together, all their mannerisms, what they do. And I source that attitude from 1, experience, and 2, I always get public transport. I use public transport all the time. I walk everywhere and I watch people all the time. I watch people do the most basic things in life. So I'm fascinated when I have a group of people in front of me observing the minutiae about them, and I employ all that minutiae into the group shot. The inspiration for my projects come from looking at painting, really. Maybe I should have been a painter. I was very good at art at school. I gave it up. Maybe I should never have given it up. I am from painting. And painting's constantly developing, and especially modern painting. I mean, I remember paintings, what was it now? From Today, Painting is Dead. Was that Degas? I can't remember who said it, really, in the 19th century. But in fact, today, painting is inspired by photography. If you look at modern figurative painting, they're looking at photographs to get inspired by. And so therefore it's a double whammy, really. One, I'm getting inspired by painting, and they're using photography to be inspired by, so they're double inspiring me because they're reinterpreting photography in a painterly way, so I'm getting inspired by that. In fact, modern figurative painters are my true inspiration. Actually, the coloration of the picture of Denise Lewis and Jonathan Edwards is based upon the coloration of Edward Burne-Jones' painting. I saw the colour of this metal turnstiles and this glass in Lowcock building, the big building in Canary Wharf. And I looked at the colour of it, and it's like deep, dirty green, you know, and it reminded me of a Burne-Jones painting. It's really interesting. I like sat down one evening. I knew I'd got to photograph these young people, you know, called the Young Ambassadors. I was thinking, how can I do this? What am I going to do? And all of a sudden, inside came this painting that I love at the National Gallery, and it was Titian's Allegory of Prudence. I remember, you know, but I remembered this painting in my inner psyche, whatever. But then I couldn't remember what the title was, and I couldn't remember really where I'd seen it. But then I went back to the National Gallery and found it again. But it was just like this bearded man with this lion's head and these other two heads, you know, one coming left and one coming right of this bearded man that's at the front of the painting. That was a great breakthrough when I found that. But really, essentially, the concept of photographing all these people is using the history of painting, the history of portrait painting, and the cinema. Like if you take the cinema, for instance, some of the groups are inspired by the cinema, like The Apprentices is very cinematic. Who else is very cinematic? Maybe the ODA 5 is quite cinematic. The stadium team is, and also the velodrome team. They're I regard those as cinematic, whilst some of the others are very sculptural, like Steve Redgrave and Jude Kelly is very sculptural. Tony Winterbottom and Ken Livingstone is very sculptural. And in fact, going back to Jonathan Edwards and D.S. Lewis, that's very sculptural. So I think I'm trying to take, you know, certain avenues of inspiration, really. And although we're using real places of relevance, because the people are actually photographed generally in places that they're part of, either stadia they've built, or a school that they were taught in, or a building they worked in, or a building they work in. So there is relevance to every space the subjects are photographed in. But they're just hints of it, really. They're just like little bits and pieces of things. And the great one, which you're probably thinking of, is Lisa Zabriskie and her father. Now that's quite a relevant image in the sense of non-places. It's the corner of the bus station which brings the workers into the Olympic Park. But it's got relevance in the sense that there's a podium that's concrete flooring that you're going to construct something upon or place something on that's relevant and important. But I looked at it as the podium, really, that this sculpture of this father and daughter are positioned on. You can see in the picture he's holding her and she's in a running position. But in the background there's a relevance in the sense to the background there, because it's got the old Olympic fence, which is blue, which is now substituted by a high-tech fence. But it's just the corner of nothing, that place. You know, I always feel that if you use a background that's really powerful, then it overtakes the subject matter. So I tend not to do it. That's the reason I don't do it. Yeah, I've always had a trainee program. I'm really fortunate at the moment. I've got the best 2 assistants in the world, and I don't want to lose them ever, but I will, because they'll progress. My first assistant's the finest assistant I've ever had in my career. My second assistant is a trainee, and it's part of a philosophy I've had, or a policy I've had rather, as well as a philosophy all my career, as I always take on a raw recruit, really, who shows great potential as a photographer. They tend to spend a year with me, if possible, and they come straight from college or virtually a year or so after college, and I train them up and send them off in the world. Particularly, I'm very proud this time. My second assistant, Luke, comes from one of the boroughs, the Olympic boroughs. In fact, he lives just the other side of the Olympic fence, actually. Not in the Olympic Park, but in amongst civilization, really. We're just over the road here, over the river here, which is right next to where we're being interviewed. The Thames, this is here. And is the Olympic Park, you know. And I've lived in southeast London, Rotherhithe, just over the river from Canary Wharf now for 30 years, you know. So the Olympic Park is part of my neighbour, is my neighbour. So I feel almost like it's in my locality, you know. I could probably walk it in half an hour from here. And so I want to be part of what's happening around here, you know. And when I've been working on this project and I've seen the energy in that park, you know, I'm so happy that I'm involved in it, because it's going to be marvellous, really.